One of the principles or choices we get to make as chief soul officers is we choose values over validation. Really get clear on what are your values. This is one of the best filters you can ever have in the life of a human, in the life of a brand, because you can only answer to any question or any choice. It's a hell yes or a hell no. There is no such thing as a hell maybe.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, and you're listening to Soul and Science. Fast forward your marketing mind in about 20 minutes. Authenticity, and I'm talking real, unapologetic authenticity, can transform your life. But it might mean stepping away from what looks like on the surface your dream job or your dream situation. Today, I'm talking with Shelley Paxton. She's a thought leader, speaker, and author of the best-selling book, Soulbbatical. She was formerly the CMO at Harley Davidson. She took a courageous leap to redefine success on her own terms and has since emerged as a sought-after expert in culture transformation and personal development. In today's episode, you'll learn how to embrace that unapologetic authenticity and allow it to be a catalyst for both personal and professional transformation. You'll learn how to redefine success beyond societal norms. You'll learn what it means to be your own chief soul officer, and you'll learn how to live a hell yes life. All right, let's dive in and fast forward our marketing minds. Tell me about your origin story to get to where you are right now.
Oh man. All right. I'll give you the short version. And if there's,
I don't think you can do the short version.
oh, well, that's a challenge, my friend.
That's a challenge.
Challenge accepted. You're probably right, because I love to talk, and I'm super passionate about this. So, I am born and bred in the Midwest. I spent most of my young adult years as a rebel who was seeking. I was rebelling against everything you could imagine. My parents, religion, authority. I was getting in all kinds of trouble. And I came to realize that I was really seeking, like finding my people and my place in the world and my identity. And that kind of sent me on this search that, to be honest, led me to my career. And I talk a lot about this in the book, so I know that we'll get there. But I started traipsing around the world, and I ended up in global marketing, which became my ticket for representing fabulous brands that took me to fabulous places around the world. Ultimately, that led me to becoming VP and ultimately Chief Marketing Officer of Harley Davidson, where I got to not only fly around the world, but I got to ride freaking motorcycles around the world. And that is probably what most people would say is like the top of the proverbial mountain. I was at the peak of a 26-year advertising and marketing career. And you would imagine, or at least I expected, that at that point, like joy and fulfillment would be served up on this silver platter. And instead, I heard this little voice inside asking me, is this all there is? And I was feeling empty and exhausted, which honestly did not compute, given that from the outside looking in, I had the coolest fucking job on the planet, at least the sexiest one, serving Harley Davidson. And that led me on this journey to reconnect with my soul that I called my Soulbbatical, and became a book and a mission, and honestly, my life's work. How was that?
That was a very good synopsis of where we are today with Shelley Paxton. And so was there an event that happened where you said that I really have to change and this is not good for me?
Yeah. And I realized in hindsight that I was not listening, or what I always say is pretending not to know. So Jason, as you know, my book starts with my wake-up call, which was a nightmare. I had the same nightmare nearly every night of my final year at Harley Davidson. And it really was that wake up for me of, are you going to pay attention? And if you don't, what price are you ultimately going to pay? What I was seeing in this nightmare was a proxy for my soul, and my soul was dying and crying out to be loved and listened to and nourished. And that was the thing that truly woke me up to say, you've got a choice, sister. Like, you're at a crossroads. What are you going to do about it? And I was 46 at the time. So what I really started to think about was, what does this look like when you're 50? Do you want to continue on this same road? Or are you gonna slow down and listen? And what does that mean? And of course, that's a terrifying question in and of itself, because for me, it was the question of, are you going to stay at Harley? Are you going to leave Harley? Are you crazy enough to leave one of the sexiest jobs in marketing? And obviously 7-ish years ago, that is the choice that I made.
How'd you take a departure versus saying, maybe I'll just move into marketing, but in a more chill role? Because I think it's hard for us when we've achieved a level of success, we're really bound and tied to that as our identity.
Yeah, and I guess there are a few levels to this that I want to talk about and we can explore. One is, none of this happened overnight. So I think it's important to say that I was having this nightmare for my final year at Harley. It took me about 3 to 6 months to even work up the courage to ask for help, to go to a professional. And I want to pause and say, for anybody listening, like, asking for help is a sign of strength. It is not a sign of weakness. And I think especially as, really successful people, type A, often achievers that so many of us are, and I'm sure many of your listeners are, it's really hard to ask for help. And so, number one, I had to slow down and realize that this is something I wasn't going to be able to process on my own. So inviting in a therapist and a coach and a doctor, and really starting to dig deep to understand what was going on, which then was my doorway or portal to reconnecting with my soul and starting to listen. So that was the first thing, was slowing down. The second part of it was, even when I did that and I started to understand that this was my soul speaking to me, it was another 6 months before I actually left Harley. So we truly are talking about a year. And my message is not at all, leave your job. That absolutely was my path. I didn't know it at the time, like why I was being called to leave. But I really said, you know what? I've got a little cushion. I could walk away for about a year. I might come back to the corporate world. I might come back to another CMO position. I really don't know, but I want to invest in the possibility of my future self. I want to understand, who is Shelley Paxton? Like you said, identity was a huge piece of this. I had to untangle a lot. My entire identity was founded on and was clinging to, and ultimately just enmeshed with, this idea of sexy brands, big paychecks, global travel, all of the things. And so I had to start to unwind that. So I made a decision to walk away, but it wasn't before I spent a lot of time making sure that the marketing organization, we were going through a reorg at the time. So without telling Harley I was leaving, I was making sure I was creating the most, future-proof, badass marketing organization that could be, taking care of my people and putting a successor in place to make, honestly, the most difficult decision of my life to date.
I'd love to hear any ways that you use to, kind of decouple your identity from your job. I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, of course you are. And this friend is still working on it every single day. But I'll tell you, when I made the decision to leave Harley, everyone around me was looking at me like I was insane. Like I should be locked up in a padded room. My own family didn't understand or support the decision. I felt very, very alone. And yet I knew that it was one of the most important decisions that I was making. So that as, that as context, I thought it meant leaving your job. So I created this word, Soulbbatical, because I had no way, I didn't know how to talk about this. I'm like, who does this? What crazy person leaves the role of CMO of Harley Davidson or any sexy brand for that matter? CMOs have a short shelf life. Why don't you just live it out, let them fire you and move on? And yet I was deeply called to do this. And this idea of Soulbbatical came to me because it wasn't a vacation, it wasn't a traditional sabbatical, but it was this idea that I was going to take time off to reconnect with my soul. So I came up with this word Soulbbatical that I thought meant leaving your job, traveling around the world, quote unquote, finding yourself. I have since come to learn that is not what it means at all, which I'd love to come back to. And I gave myself a title, Chief Soul Officer, because I was very title sensitive at the time. And I wanted a title that reminded me that my highest responsibility and deepest obligation was to really uncover my soul's truth. And so with those things in hand, I embarked on this journey. And the work that I ended up that smacked me in the face is this identity work. I didn't see it coming. So you're asking for a friend and you have awareness around it. The truth is, I had really no awareness of how much of my identity, this 26-year career serving McDonald's and Visa and Harley Davidson and other iconic brands, really was like how I thought about myself. It was my worth. It was my value. And that smacked me in my face. When I left, I was like, oh my God, who the fuck am I? In terror. And I found myself, fast forward several months, I found myself in New Zealand, one of the places I went on Soulbbatical, again, when I thought it was, cruising around the world and trying to.
You thought it was like Eat, Love, Pray tour, right?
A little bit. And it's like the age old, I forget who said it, but wherever I go, there I am, or wherever you go, there you are. Right. So I'm in this little seaside cottage in New Zealand and I'm professing that it's time to start writing again. And I'm starting to write. And then this massive monsoon, like New Zealand has never seen before, hits. And I'm stuck by myself in this little tiny cottage thinking that the sea is going to come washing into the little living room. And and in that moment, I realized oh, this is my hero's journey. I am in the dark cave. This is my dark night of the soul, and I am going to face my demons. And the first demons for me was starting to unpack my identity and how intertwined it was and all the things we just talked about. And I literally, so you asked me about a tool. This is about as simple as it gets and as challenging as it gets. I just started writing down. It was like Bart Simpson. Remember when Bart Simpson had to write, the same sentence over and over again on the chalkboard? So I was writing in my notebook, my journal, who the fuck am I? Who the fuck am I? Who the fuck am I? And then I started, as I was like, okay, well, I have to start answering that question. And what if I answer that question, but I can't use titles and accolades and, all the things that I'm used to, brands, all the stuff that I'm used to using to define who I am in the world. And I have to start getting to my essence and my core and my truth and my values. I started to write my I am list. I am a badass. I am a trailblazer. I am who am I at my core without all of these things? And I'm not saying that I did this once and I got it right and I moved on and the sun started shining and I was fixed. I've been doing this ever since for many, many years, but that was the starting point for me. So you have to write those things down, repeat them every day, continue to edit and add to that list until you truly believe it. And that was the turning point for me. Was I didn't believe it at first. I was writing stuff down and I'm like, I'm bold, I'm beautiful. I'm like, that's fucking bullshit. And then I was like, wait a second. So I kept doing it and doing it. And so that was the beginning of me really asking this profound question, which is, what if Shelley Paxton was the most iconic brand I could ever represent? And that's an exciting and terrifying question.
It was almost as if you were building these other brands and neglecting your own brand. And now you've been focusing for, a number of years on your brand. That can still be a lot of travel and very tiring and a lot of hours. And is it partly finding the thing that lights up your soul that you're excited to do? Or is it more of a conclusion of balancing your life?
I'm not a fan of the words life balance. I think it sets us up for failure. I prefer to think about it as what is in alignment for you. The best way to represent it for me is like a Venn diagram, because we're all business people. We love a good Venn diagram, right? So if you think about a Venn diagram and one circle is how you live and lead, the other circle is what fuels your soul or what really lights you up. And the greater the overlap, the more full or the more energizing. The smaller the overlap or the greater the distance between the two, the more empty, the less fulfilled. That is super simplistic, but you get the idea. So again, this tracks back to, it's not about leaving your job. It's really about how the choices we are making in terms of how we live and lead. So I get it. We live in an always on world, but one of the principles that I preach as Chief Soul Officer, which by the way is a title I offer to everyone listening to this podcast right now, like, you're welcome. This is a title that we get to hold because it reminds us that we get to make choices to show up for ourselves in ways that are aligned with our truth, our values, and our deepest desires. So some of the choices we get to make are, when do we pause? What boundaries do we create so we can avoid burnout, right? We get to, I could go on and on. You can tell me how deep you want to go, but that's the stuff to me that's so important, because then it's helping us to live a more aligned life. It is a life, that Venn diagram, when it's truly overlapping in a greater and greater way, that's what success full looks like. And I think so many of us in so many roles are living success empty lives, but society has told us that all the things we're doing should lead to fulfillment. And we get to decide what is our success currency. I talk about success being more of a feeling and less of a checklist. And to me, that leads to a greater overlap. And you get to decide what that looks like in your life.
We also over-index on caring about what other people think about us. We're doing things that are not necessarily good for us, but we're doing them because we want to get positive reinforcement or be liked or feel we're achieving expectations that others have put on us. If you're taking care of yourself, we're all connected. You start taking care of the world. But if you're not taking care of yourself because you're thinking about what other people think about you, that becomes a problem.
I love that you brought this up, because one of the principles or choices we get to make as Chief Soul Officers is we choose values over validation. And it's exactly what you just spoke about. And one of the other exercises, so here's another practical thing for anybody, like if this is resonating with you, here's another thing that I did that changed my life. And I do this with groups all the time. Go and find, actually, Jason, I can give you the link to put in the show notes. Brene Brown has a 1-page PDF of values. There are 100+ values written on this piece of paper. One of the most profound things we can do is get super clear on what our top values are. And so I challenge any group that I work with to get to your top 3. And it is tough work, because you look at 100, you can pretty easily get to 25. you can maybe get to 15. When you start to get to 10 and then 5 and then 3, you're asking yourself some pretty provocative questions about what matters to you. And ultimately, the kind of life I'm talking about and really living a successful life is living in alignment with your values and your truth and your deepest desires. So do yourself a favor. This is an invitation to really get clear on what are your values, because that is a stepping stone to making some really important decisions about what stays and what goes in all facets of your life. And it could be that you love your work, you love being CMO, for example, but maybe you're not with a brand or a company that feels aligned with your values, as one example, right?
That's a good example. I had to figure out my values probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And it was a big game changer. Because like when we started the company, we started it with 7 values. And we stuck to those values, and it really helped the company. But I was doing it for the company, and I wasn't looking at my personal values, which I did years and years later, which made a big difference, because those values allow you to determine what you say yes to, what you say no to, and where you're spending your energy, because they are in alignment.
This is one of the best filters you can ever have in the life of a human, in the life of a brand, because you can only answer to any question or any choice. It's a hell yes or a hell no. There is no such thing as a hell maybe. I was taught this very early on, and I love that. I use it in my life all the time. It's like, I was subscribing to a lot of maybes and I was making them yeses in my life. And so that was a game changer for me. I got really clear on my filters, and now it's much easier for me to say, which column does that belong in?
Do you ever still do any maybes?
Oh, of course I do. I'm human.
There's times when you have to, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Listen, like everything else, this is creating that awareness. I think the fact that we even, because I'm aware of that construct and my values, it forces a pause. And the pause has gotten me a lot further than before I would knee jerk react. I had a coach who gave me the best advice. He's like, don't say yes or no to anything right away. Say, I'll sleep on it. And that gave me a chance to slow down. I mean, honestly, it all ties back to one of my greatest pieces of advice to anyone and everyone, which is slow down. We can't know our values and know ourselves and set an example and have the ripples of impact we want to have if we're not slowing down. So I feel like everything we're talking to, like all roads converge in that space. I think it's the greatest lesson.
Do you have any techniques for people that need to, well, I guess it sounds like everyone needs to slow down, but a lot of times we're speeding up because we're overwhelmed and we need to get that list checked off because we have the physical feeling that we are going to drown if we don't start checking things off. Do you have any techniques for how to slow down?
Yeah, well, I'll share what the wise person, when I said I asked for help while I was still at Harley and I was having this nightmare, and one of the first wise people I went to visit, he said, if you can't take 10 minutes to slow down, you probably need 3 hours. And I was like, whoa, that hit me really hard. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. When we tell ourselves, I don't have time to slow down, I don't have time to care for myself, these are stories. So I think part of this whole journey is also unwinding the narratives in our own heads that we have fully subscribed to. And I'm saying this, and listen, I still have a playlist of these. I have a new playlist every day, right? But it's creating that awareness and slowing down so we can start to pull those apart and really challenge what is truth. And here's my own lived experience. It's simple. The more I slowed down, the more of that time I wanted. Now, of course, are there days where I'm like running a mile a minute? Of course there are. But then I have to pause after that and say, I'm exhausted. Where can I create space for rest or time in nature or play or just like a rejuvenation session with, someone I love, whatever it is? So I invite everyone to say, what does 10 minutes look like? Is it in your morning? Could you wake up 10 minutes earlier? And, maybe it's sitting quietly. Maybe it is a meditation, whatever it looks like for you. Once you start to create those spaces to slow down and rest and play and listen, I promise you, you will want more of it. It's the slow down to speed up philosophy.
I love that. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you always think about?
Yeah, I have lots of them. I would say I love Anais Nin. This is one that turned me around. She has a quote, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk to blossom. And that's one that always sits with me because I catch myself like tight in a bud and I'm like, what am I holding on to? And that is always the eve before when I let go and I let myself blossom. And I hope that lands with some people.
I love it. That's really strong. Is there someone that helped you through your kind of metamorphosis?
Well, I talk about having a personal board of directors. I really looked around and were like, who is inspiring me? Who is the high watermark for living their truth, for rebelling for what matters most to them? And so I call those the new rebels. And the four women I talk about in my talk that I literally think about every day, I feel like they sit on my shoulders and they help me really rise to the occasion and show up more powerfully are Michelle Obama, who is rebelling for more humanity and soul in everything she does. Brene Brown, who's rebelling for deeper connectedness and leading through vulnerability. Simone Biles, who's rebelling for reclaiming her agency in alignment with her truth. And Ariana Huffington, who's rebelling for more well-being, right? So we can thrive and not, or all aspects of well-being, I should say. So we can thrive and not just survive. And so I've kind of created, they don't know it yet. And I hope to meet all of them in person one day so I can tell them that they're on my board of directors. But all of them are bold and brave and badass in their own way. And they're not making easy decisions in the trails that they've been blazing. And so that really inspires me.
What about Shelley Paxton, who's trying to make people more successful and not success empty?
Yeah, she's a badass too.
Where do you feel like your mission wants to go now?
I feel like I've just barely started, if I'm honest with you. So I feel like there are so many more souls to be liberated. There are more books to be written. There are more stages to stand on. I don't see it fundamentally shifting in terms of what I'm speaking about. I really am on this mission to help leaders rewrite their script of success, both for themselves and for the cultures and for the world, right? We get to redefine the scripts and the systems and the definitions, and that excites me. I've only scratched the surface.
It also seems like there's a community to be built around this notion with, tools and training.
The foundation of all of this, I think I need smart people like you, Jason, and the work that Mekanism does to help me think through, like, what is that foundation? Honestly, I would say the hardest thing that I have had to do in the past 5 years of being an entrepreneur is market myself. It is so hard. It is much easier, at least in my experience, to stand and look at an iconic brand and just see so clearly a path forward versus something that is just so much the fabric and essence of me. So that is a next step and something that I need help with.
Where can people reach you or find out more?
Yeah, shelleypaxton.com is my website. It's got all the things from books to podcasts to speaking to all the yummy stuff. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Shelley Paxton on LinkedIn. Follow me on Instagram at Soulbbatical. Those are the big places. And my podcast, Rebel Souls, which you've been on, will
Yes,
be
I have.
back in 2024. So that's all the juicies.
Well, thanks for your time, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you for having me. I love soulful conversation with you all day. Love it.
Soul and Science is a Mekanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.